Well, good morning and welcome once more to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast, Elevenses. It's show number 334. It's Wednesday, the 17th of May, and here in London, it's a bright looking day out there. A fair amount of cloud around, but the sun is shining right at this moment. So, what have we got for you today? Well, as usual, some news and some views, which you may or may not agree with, but let's carry on and see what I have got together for you. To start with, arsonists have been torching cars in Wimborne, sleepy little town down in Dorset. We'll have a look at that. It is alleged that they were riding motorcycles when it happened. The Irish have they sent a team of firefighters from Dublin out to Spain, where they actually managed to save a downed rider on a motorway. A graffiti artist has found a quick way to get potholes fixed in Manchester, and another pothole has been filled in Cornwall, which hasn't met with approval. Royal Enfield have released another 650 version of their very successful twin-cylinder engine. Have a look at that bike. The RZ250 and the RZ350 names have been claimed by Yamaha out in Japan, so that could possibly represent a new lease of life for those bikes. We knew them as the RDs, of course. And then we have the latest Honda electric moped, which is appearing, and I'll have a look at why I don't think that one's going to sell at all. And you may not want to buy an €80,000 bike just because it's got Mika Hakkinen's signature on it either. That's The Verge. And finally, in the why would you run a steam-powered bike on beer? Somebody's done it though, and we can have a look at that story too. And finally, today's discussion point. I'll move on to this one. This is in response to discussions that were going on following Storm Noah, which hit us just after Easter, you may recall. What strength of wind is dangerous when we come to ride a motorcycle? So make yourselves a brew, grab yourself a biscuit, pull up a chair, and join me live twice a week for Elevenses. Right, okay, let's crack on with the first news story. Now, this refers to an incident that actually happened in Wimborne, oops, that's not the picture I wanted, that's the one I wanted. Now, it seems that vandals went on what was called a rampage in what is the quiet town of Wimborne Minster, and they set fire to 13 vehicles there and towards Poole on Sunday night. And here's a photograph of what the scene was actually like in one street. As you can see, two vehicles ablaze there. 13 vehicles in fact set fire to, and it seems that the fire from one burning vehicle actually spread to a building as well, to a house. Now, one witness said that there was this effectively a loop of cars on fire. Firefighters worked throughout the night to put out these fires. The first started at 11:30 on Sunday evening. The final fires were actually put out sometime around about 3 o'clock on Monday morning. And Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service said that they received 65 999 calls. Hang on a minute, I've got somebody at the door. That'll probably be the collection. Right, there we go, real life live. So that was the parcel that should have been picked up on Monday. Anyway, right, so back to the story from Wimborne. As I said, Wiltshire and Fire and Rescue, they said 65999 calls were actually received by its service control centre about the fires. Now, it's reported that CCTV footage and doorbell footage of the arsonists shows them pouring accelerant onto the vehicles before setting them ablaze, and they were also recorded as moving from street to street on a motorcycle, but no details of that are yet available. Dorset Police are appealing for witnesses, so if anybody does have any footage from their CCTV or dash cam, they are being asked to come forward. Right, okay, so fairly depressing story there. Slightly better one here. Move to Spain, and what we have here on the scene is a team of Irish firefighters. Now, they were from Dublin. They'd been to Spain for a conference, and they actually are reported to have saved the life of a rider who crashed on a Spanish motorway. They were travelling back to Malaga Airport, the six-man team, after attending this rescue conference in Seville, when they came across the crash scene. The middle-aged man, who was unconscious, had multiple injuries and wasn't actually breathing. They were able to protect the crash scene and give the rider first aid, and you can see somebody there holding his hand. The Dublin's fire brigade, they have praised the actions of its members, and they said that one of the team did have specific training in motorcycle injuries, and he also had experience of treating motorcycle injuries from working at race events. The Seville emergency services said that with their help the man began to breathe, and they certainly avoided him experiencing a respiratory failure and cardiac arrest. And they tweeted, "He cannot imagine who saved his life, the one who was holding his hand encouraging him, or the one who was holding his head to avoid spinal injury. They are 3,000 kilometers far away from Seville." These kind of stories happen when the vocation for public service has no limit. Thanks a lot, mates. So there we go, fairly heartwarming story there. Here's another story with a slightly more amusing content. After a cyclist friend was injured after hitting a pothole, a graffiti artist who goes by the name of Wanksy, a hooligan for others, decided to use washable paint to draw attention to potholes around the Greater Manchester area. And as you can see, these are a couple of his potholes that have been patched. He decided that the only way to attract attention was to draw a penis around the said potholes. And according to one website that checked how easy it is to report a pothole, if you want to do it on the Manchester City Council website, it takes 5 clicks. To get to the right page. You then have to complete a form, then you have to complete a survey, and then it said it will be a minimum of 5 days just to get the pothole inspected. Now, despite Bury Council spokesman saying painting obscene graffiti around potholes will not get them repaired any quicker, but simply waste valuable time and resources, and it is considered vandalism, it seems the potholes were repaired in just 48 hours, even if the paint wasn't actually washed off. So it does seem that Wanksy has found a quicker way to get attention. Meanwhile, down in Cornwall, persons unknown without consent filled a huge pothole on a road that had been closed for 6 weeks with a concrete patch, and it seems they also took down the road closed barriers so that motorists could use the road again. Cornwall Highways are so unhappy about this, they've asked the local community to share any information which could identify the person responsible and promptly close the road again. It's scheduled for repair on June 9th, but the council statement actually implies that that date could slip and could be weeks away, as all available teams have been diverted to fill smaller potholes on roads which are still open. Now, don't forget, if you want to come along and support my efforts here with Elevenses and all the other better biking articles that I create over on my Facebook page. They're all archived on my Coffee page, and you can pop over there, and if you buy me a cuppa, you can access 1,000 of better biking articles at the moment. More are going up every week, and if you subscribe and become a regular on there, you'll get access to even more content. There's still plenty to read over there for free, so do pop over and take a look, and if you think it's worth it, bung me a cuppa. I'd much appreciate it. Helps keep these shows coming out. Right, now what else is going on in the world? Well, motorcycles. The Royal Enfield shotgun. Let's have a quick look at that. Here it is. So what do we know about this? Well, it's the latest Royal Enfield. The platform concept is clearly alive and well in India, and Royal Enfield are continuing to make the most of their highly successful 650 twin. So, to go with the Interceptor Roadster and the sportier Continental, the company is also producing a more laid-back custom-style Super Meteor, which I've shown before on this show. But this is the latest incarnation. As you can see, it's a fairly aggressive-looking design with those sort of flat bars and mid-placed footrests, and it's the Shotgun 650. It's A2 license compliant almost certainly on 47 horsepower, but it gets a shortened single seat and tow unit there. Now personally I think it looks pretty hideous, but hey, what do I know? I'm sure that there will be plenty of people out there for whom it is just perfect. Now back over in Japan, Yamaha could be about to launch a pair of new RZ models. Now if you've got long memory, you'll probably recall the RD250 and RD350. They were known elsewhere, and including in Japan, as the RZ 250 and RZ350. And it seems that last month Japan claimed both trade names for Japan. Did I say Japan twice? I mean Yamaha claimed both trade names in Japan. Now it's unlikely, of course, that we'd ever see a return of the ring-ding-a-ding two-strokes, since the emission rules would make that just about impossible. But as with the R7 name, which you may recall was also formerly reserved for a high-spec track-oriented four-cylinder bike, which was really aimed at the old superbike class. It was a strictly limited edition bike, and you basically take the lights off it and you'd have a racer. The R7 name recently reappeared on a sort of mildly sporty looking version of the Yamaha MT-07, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the RZ name could reappear on a couple of sporty 250 and 350 four-strokes. Now, one bike that probably won't be grabbing your attention particularly is this one here. Now, this is the Honda EM1E colon, the electric scooter. That obviously that colon is behind the one, behind the E is all important. So, what exactly is this machine? Well, it's a 1.7 kilowatt 2.3 horsepower electric powered scooter. It sits firmly in the moped class. It gets a top speed of just 45 kph or 28 miles per hour. If that doesn't set the world alight, neither will the battery. The bike runs on Honda's mobile power pack that in fact is based on the swappable battery technology that's been developed by a consortium that includes Honda, Yamaha and KTM I think are also in it. But to be frank, the bike not only delivers the feeble moped performance, the maximum range is a fairly astonishingly short 48 kilometers, just 30 miles. And under more realistic tests, it seems the bike will only manage 30 k. That's just 18.6 miles, and that's barely enough for me to ride from here in my location just inside the North Circular Road in northwest London to Charing Cross and back. Now, part of the problem is that the bike doesn't seem to have been given regenerative braking, presumably to keep the costs down. and just a conventional disc up front and a drum at the back. So what little energy the battery does contain is lost for all time when you slow down again. And it gets worse. Despite the fact the battery is tiny, it takes almost 3 hours to charge from 25 to 75%. So no wonder battery swap stations are being installed in Tokyo in Japan. And finally, if that wasn't bad enough, you don't actually get to buy the bike, you have to lease it, meaning the rider doesn't have to take full responsibility of the battery for disposal or recycling, but it undoubtedly will bump up the price of the machine. So after that, the 3 litres of under-seat storage, the USB port, the bottle holder and the handbag hook don't really swing the deal for me. So I would expect to see these sitting unwanted in showrooms from later this summer. That's when they're due to arrive in the UK. Now, another bike that possibly won't be helping your wallet to empty itself is this one here. This is the Mika Hakkinen limited edition Verge. It seems that Verge Motorcycles, the Finnish company, are actually set to release the bike. Are they Finnish or Swedish? I can't remember now. Anyway, they're set to release this bike. It's got a custom two-tone finish. It's got all black suspension. It's got carbon fibre detailing and, believe it or not, a ceramic coating with no less than nanotechnology, which apparently cures the paint and offers a glass-like protective layer that protects against minor scratches and ultraviolet light. The bike also gets a dual leather seat, and you get a leather keycard holder. And more to the point, the bike also comes with its own unique frame-mounted serial number. Although frankly, I thought all bikes had those. Presumably this one counts from 1 to 100 because there are only 100 of these machines being built, which of course rather begs the question of how many of the ordinary model of Verge have actually managed to build and ship yet. But the selling point that will no doubt have you maxing out your credit card right now is the fact that the bike will shift for no less than €80,000. You do get two-time Formula 1 world champion Mika Hakkinen's signature on the bike though. It seems that Hakkinen is an investor in Verge and was appointed to the company's advisory board recently, and supposedly he designed this signature version of their TS Pro model. Right, last but not least, for the silly season and right up there with the what on earth were you thinking end of the spectrum, is the new motorcycle built by Kai Michelson, who appears to be a stunt rider who's worked on various movies and TV shows, and he's designed a steam-driven motorcycle. Now, you may not think that that's anything particularly exciting. Frankly, it's been done before. It's been done right back to the dawn of the powered two-wheeler age, in fact well over 100 years ago, but for some reason that I am unable to fathom, even given the fact that Michelson says he doesn't drink the stuff, he decided that rather than use water to provide steam, he'd use beer. So there's a 14-gallon keg wedged between the frames, which is fitted with a heating coil. And as far as I can tell, it doesn't do the conventional steam power thing and drive a piston. The jet of steam simply fires out the back of the bike at no less than 300 degrees Fahrenheit, so I really wouldn't want to be standing anywhere near that bike when it takes off. Now apparently Michelson thinks that the bike would be capable of 150, but he hasn't tested it yet. If it weren't for the fact that he says I don't drink, I'm not a drinker, so I can't think of anything better than to use beer as fuel, I would actually have believed that he had been drinking his own source of power. I cannot see how this will get anywhere near 150 miles an hour, even given a long run. If you have to, you can watch a Fox News report on the video. I've just discovered that this is going out as a private video for some reason and not public. I have no idea how that happened. God, Benny, every time I set these things up it goes wrong. Okay, well, I shall have to make it unprivate at the end of the show. Alright, on to the final part of the show. What strength of wind is dangerous for riding? Now, you may remember our mini heat wave back in Easter. It did the usual thing and fizzled out towards the end of the holiday weekend, and in just a few days later some parts of the country were hit by Storm Noah. This landed across the south of England on the following Wednesday. Now, since the sort of warm weather over Easter actually kick-started the fair weather riding season, the storm actually did produce some debate on what constitutes a safe speed for riding in wind. Now let's have a look at the map, the wind speed map from Storm Noah. Here it is, and you'll see that the strongest winds were expected to progress along the south of the UK. They hit South Wales, they hit the southwest of England first, and then they progressed along the south coast towards Kent. Now, gusts of up to 70 miles per hour were expected in Devon and Cornwall, but a lot of riders were actually downplaying the warnings. Some claimed that they regularly rode in 60-mile-per-hour winds. Others said that 60-mile-per-hour winds can't be that bad because we can ride at 60 miles an hour and we don't get blown off the bike. So I thought actually it would be a good place to try to explain how wind speeds actually work. And the best place of all to start is probably the Beaufort scale, because it's simple, straightforward and easy to understand. Now, Beaufort scale was devised in 1805 by an Irish hydrographer who was also a Royal Navy officer, Francis Beaufort, and the reason he produced the scale was to try to standardise weather observations. Now, data had been collected by ships at sea for at least a century beforehand, but the trouble was everybody was using their own kind of subjective assessment of how strong the wind was. So it was difficult to cross-compare one recorded sort of wind observation of a storm or something with another ship not so far away experiencing the same storm. So what Beaufort did was he used the effects of wind on the sails of a frigate to create this scale that ran from just sufficient to give steerage, that is to get the ship moving and to be able to direct itself, to at the level at which no canvas could withstand the wind. And this was made a standard for ship's log entries in the late 1830s. So this is the Beaufort scale. Let's have a quick look at it. Here it is. And let me just zoom in on the top part of the scale to start with and show you where we are. So there we go. There's 0 to 5. So here's the scale, and you'll see that also that it was adapted to land use. It was also adopted as an international standard in 1853. By that time the wind anemometer had been invented, and so the observations could be directly related to actual wind speed. So here's the Beaufort scale and the land conditions which allow you to match wind speed and observation. So calm, force 0 on the Beaufort scale, you'll see that smoke rises vertically, and that happens at a wind speed of less than 1 mile per hour. The Beaufort 1 on the scale is called light air, and now we can see that wind drifts, but wind vanes don't move. Now you're looking at a wind speed of around 1 to 3 miles per hour. Now at force 2 it's called light breeze by Beaufort, and now we can feel the wind on our face, and leaves will rustle in that very gentle breeze, and the wind vane will be moved to point in the right direction, and you're looking at a speed of between 4 and 7 miles per hour. A gentle breeze, that's force 3 on the Beaufort scale. Now we will see leaves and small twigs being in constant motion on a tree, and light flags will also be extended. We're looking at 8 to 12 miles per hour. Now things are getting a bit windier. At force 4, just a moderate breeze, it'll raise dust and loose paper, and small branches on trees will be moved around, and we're looking at 13 to 18 miles per hour. By 5, which is a fresh breeze, small trees in leaf will begin to sway. So they'll actually, the whole tree trunk will start to move. And if you happen to be near a reservoir or something like that, or a large stretch of open water of some sort, you'll see little crested wavelets starting to form, and that's 19 to 24 miles per hour. Now, the fact is, the term breeze doesn't get most people worrying much, but from my own sort of empirical observations riding the bike, I'd say that it's about here we'll start to feel the effect of the wind on our ride. If it's a headwind, we'll certainly feel the added drag on a naked if we try to ride at motorway speeds. Fuel consumption will probably suffer too. If it's a side wind, we'll probably have to steer the bike a little to compensate for the force of the wind trying to push us sideways. If it's a tailwind, well, that's lovely because it's behind us and pushing us forwards, and the bike's fuel consumption will improve slightly too. But from here on in, it only gets worse. So let's look at force 6. Now we're looking at a strong breeze, and this is when you'll see large branches on trees in motion. If you're standing near some overhead lines, you may well hear whistling, and if you are trying to protect yourself against the rain with an umbrella, you'll find it very difficult. Your brolly will get blown around all over the place and start turning itself inside out. By 7, we are actually starting to use the term gale, and we're talking about a moderate gale here, and this will have whole big trees moving around. The whole tree will sway. It'll become increasingly difficult to walk against the wind, and we're still only talking a wind speed of 32 to 38 miles an hour. By now, out on the road, you'd be struggling to keep a car steering in a straight line. On a bike, it would be hard to do anything like steer in a straight line, frankly. And by the time we get to this level, I would be avoiding riding. I certainly wouldn't be going out on the bike if I could avoid it. If I was caught out in this kind of weather, I would get straight off a motorway and I would be trying to find a more sheltered route to get home. I'd certainly be keeping the speed well down. But, of course, it doesn't stop there. By force 8, we're talking about a fresh gale. Now, twigs are breaking off trees. This is where you start seeing leaves coming down in midsummer, and it generally impedes your progress. The wind speed we're talking about now is 39 to 46 miles per hour. Severe gale is force 9. That will cause structural damage to buildings. You'll lose things like a badly secured chimney pot or slates. They'll come off, and it's 47 to 54 miles per hour. I think this was the wind speed, roughly speaking, that actually took all the asphalt off the shed one year. Moving up to storm force 10, the classification says that this speed of wind is seldom experienced inland, but if it is, this is when we start finding trees uprooted and considerable structural damage. This is when end walls will collapse in buildings, that kind of thing. Scaffolding coming down, all that, entire roofs coming off. So that's storm force 10, and now we're up to 55 to 63 miles per hour. 11 and 12 on the Beaufort scale, well, we can pretty much forget those because you're not going to find those very inland in any in the UK, they're violent storm and they're hurricane, and they're described as widespread damage and devastation, respectively. Okay, so that's the Beaufort scale then in some detail. What does that mean then? Well, 60-mile-per-hour winds, as we've just seen. Are riders really experiencing 60 miles per hour wind? Well, as I've just explained, and a sustained 60-mile-per-hour wind is storm force 10, and that is when trees are being broken off or uprooted, and as I said, walls and things are collapsing. If you happen to be riding along the coast in this kind of weather, you'd be seeing 9-meter waves, 30-foot high waves out to sea. So frankly, I doubt you, me, or anyone else will be going anywhere near a motorcycle in those kind of conditions. Now, coastal and upland areas generally have the highest wind speeds for a very simple reason. It's because friction with the surface reduces speeds as the storm moves inland and at lower levels. So as the wind speed map for Storm Noah showed, if I just backtrack to that particular map for a moment, let me just get that one back on screen. There we go. The highest winds were expected around the South Wales area and the North Devon coast, and then later on along the English Channel. Now inland, the wind speeds would actually be considerably lower, but what they don't tell us is that the actual wind patterns that develop over land are rather more complex than they are at sea because of the aerodynamic effects. The wind has to move around hills, it gets channeled down valleys, it'll even be directed around and over forests and around buildings and in built up areas. So what these sustained wind speeds measurements don't tell us is that the wind rarely blows consistently hard inland, except perhaps at the very top end of the scale when it just doesn't matter. So even the fairly innocuous sounding strong breeze is when people are struggling to control their umbrellas will contain moments when the wind eddies. For one moment it will actually drop away, it'll almost feel calm, and then a moment later the wind will be back with a really significantly stronger gust. And the really important thing is that those gusts can come from almost any direction, and it's that unpredictability which is the real issue. It would be relatively easy to ride into a constant 60-mile-per-hour wind if you're in a wind tunnel, for example. You could even probably cope with that wind if it was steady from the side, but in real life winds simply aren't that predictable. And I remember when I was some years ago, I was riding back from Scotland to Norfolk right at the beginning of September, when I got caught in what I later discovered was the post-tropical remains of a hurricane. The day started bright and clear as I packed up the tent near Glencoe, but by the time I got into the borders area, it was getting increasingly wet and very windy indeed. But the very worst of the weather I encountered was as I crossed through the north of England. I remember getting blown clear off the road in the town of Tolaw. I was really lucky. I actually hit a dropped curve and was able to run up onto the pavement and just missed the wall of a house. Now, I guess from the debris being scattered around at that point, there were fairly big branches off trees that I was dodging. There were chimney pots and slates coming down. There was a shed collapsed alongside the road. I saw a fence fall down. Debris being blown across the road all over the place. The wind speed that particular day was probably somewhere around about maybe force 9, very possibly force 10, severe gale to storm. So something maybe between 47 and 63 miles per hour. And it's not a journey I want to repeat. Noah, well, the storm actually hit the UK with gusts of up to 96 miles per hour. Now, admittedly, that was on the coast at the Needles on the Isle of Wight, but even more sheltered areas such as the M48 Severn Bridge, the winds reached 68 miles per hour. So next time somebody tells you that a 60-mile-an-hour storm, the winds aren't going to be that strong and it's safe enough to ride, I would say think again. Right, okay, that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed for looking in. I do apologise that somehow this has turned into a private video. I will make it public and you will be able to watch it on catch up, but just why it went private I have absolutely no idea. I didn't do anything different from normal. Anyway, if you are out there on the bike today, it isn't looking too bad for riding. There isn't much in the way of wind at all. It looks very calm indeed. I would say stay safe and stay shiny side up.